It's always
Wow.
been to attack the central banks and fiat money. So, Bitcoin is the perfect tool and weapon in that sense. So the war
And,
continues. So I'm on this side of the divide of this global war. I represent those who are looking to not necessarily compete with central banks. We're looking to destroy central banks.
and to your point about, just look at it as a buying opportunity. I know that, you're fully happy, stocked up with your Bitcoin, but do you still buy on these down moves?
Well, my cost basis is like still under $200. So it's like it's hard to really like I went all in a long time
Hmm.
ago. So
Right.
I can nibble away at the margins, but it's not going to change anything. It doesn't change much.
Right. Right.
Because I already have a shitload of, a boatload of this stuff.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I could buy some, here and there, but my cost basis is still going to be probably one of the lowest cost bases of any major position of anyone in the world. I would submit to you as being the story. So, and I'm holding. The question is, when would I be selling? More so, really, other than when would I be buying? Right? I already bought. The question is, when do I sell? So, I don't see a situation where I would want to recirculate Bitcoin into the fiat money world. Because I don't want to give the fiat money any power. I don't want to give the politicians who run fiat money or the central bankers any power. I'm trying to starve them to death.
Wait, explain that to me though.
Well,
So if by selling your Bitcoin, how does that give fiat more power?
well, let's say I were to buy a yacht, right? Okay, so
Okay.
I'm giving the yacht
Okay.
broker Bitcoin. He's going to convert it into fiat money, most probably.
Okay.
So until we get into a situation like Bitcoin Beach, which is in El Salvador, which is a circular Bitcoin-only economy, there's only Bitcoin, and
Right.
it's circulating only.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
when we hit a global inflection point where it's a global hyper-Bitcoinization, where essentially fiat money's been destroyed completely from the system, I would feel more comfortable coming out of Bitcoin into fiat.
Gotcha.
My goal has always been, going back to 20 years with Max and Stacy, doing all of our shows for 20 years now almost. It's always
Wow.
been to attack the central banks and fiat money. So, Bitcoin is the perfect tool and weapon in that sense. So the war continues. So I'm on this side of the divide of this global war. I represent those who are looking to not necessarily compete with central banks. We're looking to destroy central banks because they are the root of all of the problems of inequality, all the problems of the environment, all the problems of over-militarization. Pretty much everything that you can put your finger at and say, this stinks. It has a root cause in money printing from irresponsible central banks that, unlike Paul Volcker in the 1970s, when I started on Wall Street, interest rates were 20% because Paul Volcker took his job seriously of dealing with inflation. Here you have inflation right now, Daniela, in America, which is about similar to where it was under Paul Volcker when he took interest rates to 20%. And they're quibbling about whether they should raise it, up to 2.5% or something like that. Or
Isn't that interesting, right?
yeah, it shows you the power of quantitative easing. It shows you the power of changing the mandate of the central bank from being lender of last resort to the buyer of first order, where they simply buy everything that Wall Street produces. The Swiss Bank of Switzerland is, one of the biggest owners of Apple stock. They print money and they buy Apple stock, right? That's what kind. That's not a central bank. That's neo-fascism. That doesn't make any sense to be doing that. What good does that do to the people who live in Switzerland?
Yeah, no, please continue.
Right. So here you have this in Japan, the balance sheet of Japan, over 100%, something like GDP of Japanese GDP is owned in securities on the balance sheet of the Bank of Japan. Right? I may have got the number a little wrong there, but I don't think I got it wrong. I think that was correct. But my point is that here they're just absorbing all of these things in ways that are dislocating the markets. Look at the housing market in the U.S. It's up 25% last year because Blackstone is out there borrowing money from the Fed at zero and buying up thousands of units.
Right.
And then jacking up rents. That's not a free market. That's not a price signal. That's an apartheid state. That's apartheid. That's what apartheid in South Africa looked like. In America, you've got interest rate apartheid, right? If I know Goldman Sachs and I can borrow at 0%, I can look at this. I'll tell you a story which was remarkable. The LVMH, Louis Vuitton in France, they bought Tiffany. Who loaned them the money to buy Tiffany? The European Central Bank under Christine Lagarde. And how much did they charge for that loan? Not zero, less than zero. Less than zero. It was given to the now richest man in the world to buy Tiffany's. So all the earnings, bam, accretive, right to the bottom line. It didn't cost him a penny. How much did Whole Foods cost Jeff Bezos? Well, his cost of money was zero. It didn't cost him anything. So if you have a group of industrialists who are borrowing money at zero to buy up huge swathes of the productive economy and keeping it for themselves, that's not capitalism. That's not democracy. That's fascism. Where's Mussolini in all of this? I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's frickin' fascism going on right now. The fusion of the banks and corporations. Right? And so Bitcoin
well, we saw it with the stress test, all the American banks passing their stress test this week from the Fed, getting, right, lowering rates of approval. So, but you know what's fascinating, Max? It really shows. We had a
stress test in 2008. Did any of them pass? No. Well, if we had an event like 2008, would any of them have any liquidity at all within 10 minutes? No, they would not. They're insolvent. They're technically insolvent. And without that multi-trillion-dollar gift coming out of the Fed's faucet every single day, they would immediately have to declare bankruptcy. This is the most egregious example.
The evolution of the central bank from being background players to becoming the market is what's really fascinating.
Well, it started with Greenspan. You know, Greenspan became a celebrity banker. You remember he was selling Apple computers. He was on the cover of Time magazine. He was, the central banker became, a master of the universe. And at a time when Wall Street became, with Michael Milken and Drexel Burnham Lambert and the Fed and Ron Perlman and Carl Icahn and Ivan Boesky. That's the era I came up through. And it transformed finance and economics at Wall Street from a somewhat sleepy background noise to being incredibly a central part of our lives as America. And then came CNBC and it became television. And then came Jim Cramer. Okay, I knock Jim Cramer all the time, but Jim Cramer is emblematic of a transition away from stocks and bonds as investments that people made to ensure future prosperity for themselves and their children into entertainment. And the entertainmentification of Wall Street, as personified by Jim Cramer, has had consequences. And we see today with Wall Street Bets and what's happening with GameStop and how social media is being used to take companies like AMC and GameStop stock on these wild rides. You talk about volatility. Look at the volatility of GameStop or AMC or Hertz Car Company. Then we're talking about much greater volatility. And that's all driven by, again, cheap money, cheap access to social media, the attitude perpetrated principally by CNBC that stocks are entertainment. And, I also contributed to this with the Hollywood Stock Exchange, where I literally made stocks into entertainment. That was my goal in the 1990s with the Hollywood Stock Exchange. So I do share in some of the blame for this.